preview for 2023. I am your host, and most of you are most likely watching on my channel, Mr. Buckeye Mike. And joining me today is Chad Stryker, host of the Buckeye Blitz channel, also on YouTube. Thank you so much for coming on, and I hope everyone enjoys the lighthearted discussion on this year's Ohio State team.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here. I've enjoyed the newish to me podcasting world, so I appreciate having the opportunity to just talk to somebody else.
Absolutely. So I guess I want to start with kind of the obvious but questionable topic that's kind of looming as far as strictly Ohio State. Do you think that Ryan Day is on the hot seat? And what would you say to those that want to believe he is?
So my abbreviated answer would be no. But the reason is when somebody asks me that, my question is, who are you going to get that's better? So who in the coaching ranks are you going to go hire that has had their team in the playoff as much as Ryan Day has already? We've played for a natty in 2020. If it wasn't for a bogus call against Clemson in 2019, we would have been playing for a natty. If it wasn't for a bogus call against Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, we probably would have won the natty because they would have routed TCU. Mm-hmm. So I understand, because I grew up in the John Cooper era, the importance of beating Michigan. Mm-hmm. So that I understand, to especially like the rank and file hardcore, got to beat Michigan, got to win the Big Ten. I get it. I do. It's frustrating. And I can't stand Michigan. It's been hard to be on Twitter. I'm sure you can understand with the Michigan folks and saying we beat you 2 years in a row. And anytime you say anything, they just come back with the score of like 45-23 or whatever it was. And so I get it. I understand, but I just don't know who you're going to get to come to who's better is my question. Who would you rather have?
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of slim pickings at this point to replace them. I mean, you know, let's just entertain it for just a minute. Mm-hmm. What are your likely options, like you said? Now, if you ask me, it comes down to about 5, maybe 4, because 2 of the 5 would be almost eerily similar. But when I think, okay, if the fan base really does force Ryan Day out after 3 straight losses to Michigan, who's going to replace him? You got Luke Fickell, which you're still going to – it could happen, and it depends on the way it goes with Wisconsin. But even then, you're going to have to suffer through more years with Ryan Day before he'd even probably entertain coming back. You have Tom Herman at Florida Atlantic. Mm-hmm. You have, who was the third one? You have Brian Hartline, who would be my top guess. Mm-hmm. Just because, you know, he's had offers already to go elsewhere, and he's decided, I'm going to stay right here, right at home, because I do believe that eventually that is his end-all be-all goal for him specifically. And then the other one, because for some reason one's eluding me, the other one, and I guess would be like my top like fan favorite choice. I don't know what it is about the guy, but I absolutely love PJ Fleck.
Yeah, I mean, Fleck has a lot of energy. I can understand the draw, being that I remember when he was at, I think it was Central Michigan, and now Minnesota, and the row the boat thing. I can get that. Brian Hartline, what I would say is you would be re-entering Ryan Day era year one, because he's never led a program. So Ryan Day's learning on the job. Urban Meyer had the advantage of coaching at Toledo, or Bowling Green, Utah, Florida, and then Ohio State. So he learned in the MAC, and then learned in the, coaching Utah, like what to do, what not to do. And, I love Luke Fickell. I do think, I'd like to see what he can do at Wisconsin. No slight to Cincinnati. Obviously he had them in the playoff. But I agree with you. I think all three of those guys are great coaches. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a Ryan Day apologist. I was kind of surprised when it was Ryan Day, when Urban stepped down. If anything, I'm probably more of an Urban Meyer guy, just because of how elite of a closer he was on the recruiting trail. That guy could get you to, sign anywhere, anytime, it seemed like. So, I think that those are all viable options. I just hope we're not there at the end of the year. I hope we're not in a third straight loss to Michigan. I know the game's in Ann Arbor. I know we have a first-time starting quarterback. The chips are kind of stacked against him, if you will. But I think if you get the Ryan Day that you got in the Georgia game last year, I think they walk away with a close win.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but I've kind of gotten to the point that, like, if you really sit down and sit back and really think about it, this is the last year that it really has any meaning, unless somehow we both have a magical run and meet in the national championship.
Mm-hmm. Great point. And I had a kind of like a little sub note, about that in my thoughts was, in 2024, not sure how much it matters. Like, it matters. The game matters. Don't like, Scarlet and Gray people, please don't like blow me up on Twitter. But it matters. Winning matters. It all matters. But I have a hard time seeing Ohio State and or Michigan in the state that both teams are now, not being in the top 12 in 2024. So the winner of that game gets better seeding, probably gets home field advantage, those kind of things. But you lose, you're still in the playoff, and then very next week, because divisions don't exist anymore, you're probably going to play each other. So, I kind of hate that a little bit, that game kind of loses a little bit of its luster, but that's the traditionalist in me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say it loses its luster, but maybe in my own way, me saying that, like, well, at least from like 24 to probably close to 2030, depending on how USC and Lincoln Riley transition over and all the other possibles that we have possibly coming. Depending on how, the dominoes fall, you're likely right to where Ohio State, Michigan, day after Thanksgiving or weekend after Thanksgiving, and then again 1 week later, and then probably again somewhere in the playoff.
Yeah, depending on seeding, absolutely, it could happen. And I think if watching Big Ten Media Days, some of my thoughts on this are kind of trickling down from what Ryan Day said at the podium, which was exactly that. You could end up playing each other 2 times in 2 weeks. And I hope folks remember a couple years ago when we played Wisconsin in the season, and then had to play Wisconsin again in the Big Ten championship game. And Wisconsin gave us a run until about midway through the third quarter. I mean, they were fighting, and it was a dogfight, and Ohio State pulled away late. So that tells you it can be incredibly difficult to play the same team twice in a season, let alone twice in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I didn't do a video on it because I was like busy with other stuff, but at the same time, I wasn't fully processing it. But I remember him saying something along those lines at media days, and it just caught me off guard. I'm like, if you move it, it takes the thrill and meaningfulness of it away. But then, when you sit there and think about it, it's like, well, how is he looking at it? Is he looking at it as like, do we really want to play the same team 2 weeks in a row? Mm-hmm. Or is he looking at it as most Michigan fans took it? Oh, Ryan Day wants to move the game because he's scared of Michigan now because he lost 2 in a row.
Yeah. I didn't interpret it like that at all. And I guess if I were flipping the script, if I, 2 years ago when Michigan fans were ready to run Jim Harbaugh out of town, and they had lost, 7 in a row, and then they forfeited in 2020, and which I think they were just trying to hose Ohio State from getting in the playoff because they knew they were going to get boat raced by 100 if they came to Columbus that weekend. Honestly, that changes the trajectory of Michigan football. If they come to Columbus in 2020 and get boat raced, Jim Harbaugh's not employed anymore. And who knows what Michigan football is today. So, whole nother topic there. But, I don't know that Ohio State is scared to play anybody. And I don't think Ryan Day is scared to coach against anybody.
I don't think so. I don't think he is. I mean, real quick on the Jim Harbaugh part, I think it was about a month or so ago when I did my Michigan preview. I sat down with a well-respected Michigan fan, and he even has connections with a bunch of others, and even said, if Harbaugh doesn't take the cut that he took coming out of 2020, and, to your point, we come down here to Columbus and get just smoked out of the stadium after the first quarter, he was bound to be fired. I mean, the argument that the crazy, like, I'm just a diehard Michigan fan and I absolutely hate Ohio State type of fans, the biggest argument I hear for them is, I love Jim Harbaugh because Jim Harbaugh has a winning record. Well, he doesn't have one in the bowl games. Dude's 2-7. It doesn't matter. He's still a winner. He's only beaten Ohio State the last 2 years. So what? He's still 2-5. That's still okay.
Yeah, I tweeted that yesterday that I just genuinely was interested what anybody's take was that let's call 2020 a tie just for the purposes of excluding it, because Harbaugh's been there 8 years. He's 2-5-1. That means his winning percentage against Ohio State is about 28%. So is that elite? Would that fly in Columbus? So right now we're talking about Ryan Day being gone, and he's already beat Michigan once, so he's 1-2-1. That it's the same thing that got John Cooper fired. John Cooper couldn't beat Michigan, and so that would not fly in Columbus. It's not acceptable in Columbus, and I do believe if Ryan Day does lose to Michigan a third time, there's going to be a lot of talk about do we move on or will we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't agree with it. I personally, get more annoyed at this point when I see graphics of like top 10 college football coaches on the hot seat. Who's within the top 10? Ryan Day.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if we take a step out of Big Ten for a minute, that list consists of like Brent Venables at number 1.
Oh man.
Sunbelt Billy at number 2 at Florida.
Yeah.
Ryan Day all the way at number 6. It's like, I guess it's better that he's at number 6, but at the same time, he's 45-6 at Ohio State. First time head coach, if I'm not mistaken. 45. He's on track to have roughly the same record as Urban Meyer in roughly the same amount of time. Now, of course, there could be one or two more losses already had 2020 not been the way that it was. But still, I mean, you come to Ohio State to be a winner, to recruit, and that's kind of the next area I want to get into. But, I mean, you come to win, you come to recruit, you come to win national championships, you come to, let's not even say – beat the ever-loving crap out of. Let's just say you come to beat Michigan. The goal is to beat them by 1.5 miles, like, the redheaded stepchild, so to speak.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I think this fan base is just there's pockets of this fan base that's just insanely crazy with the standards and expectations for Ohio State football coaches. And I don't understand it. Just give me a winner. I mean, we literally lost to Michigan last year and still made the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my whole argument is, what are you going to do, the fan base? What are you going to do now that there's a 12-team playoff, and we every year, as long as we do not fall out of the top 12, meaning as long as we don't lose more than probably 3 games, we are still have a shot at a national title. The importance of the game goes down, in my opinion. The importance of winning the Big Ten goes down, because you're still going to have Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, probably USC. Depending on who comes, you'd probably have Oregon in there. You'd probably have Florida State in there. Depending on how their seasons go, of course. And you're still vying for a national title, even at 10-2 regular season. I mean, I think the fan base needs to, as a whole, kind of step back and reevaluate everything, because of the level of importance of everything is kind of going down outside of, hey, let's make a run for a national championship. Now, like you said, Ryan's already played or coached for one, and that gives him a leg up. Now, granted, it was the freaking monster truck Alabama, of course. Yeah. If it was anybody else, we probably win. And, of course, we also ran into the monster truck of Georgia. So if it wasn't for the monster trucks, and honestly, like you said, the one missed penalty, because in my eyes, that game comes down to one missed penalty.
It does.
If it's not for that missed penalty, Ohio State has a national championship under Ryan Day. And I honestly think that even though Michigan didn't hold up their part, it still would have had value as far as, well, Ryan Day might be 0-2 against Michigan, but Ryan Day has a national championship. Give me that national championship any day of the week over a win over Michigan. Now, if you get the win over Michigan and a national championship, it's that much sweeter.
Oh, for sure. I would say that the Georgia game, you're 100% correct. If that is called right on the field, which even if they remove targeting, it's still a personal foul. 1st and goal on the 3, they go up 18 late in the 3rd quarter. They walk they're playing TCU in a national championship. Absolutely. And, I hear a lot of the standard is the standard when it comes to Ohio State. Well, the standard is the standard at Ohio State for the last 20 years. Yeah, we are spoiled as a fan base. We've won a lot of football games. We've got a couple natties in there. We've played played in Jim Tressel area. He played, Florida and then LSU in back-to-back years. And obviously Urban Meyer brought home the championship in 2014. So we are spoiled. We're used to winning, and I think that's probably what you hear. But yeah, if you could run through Michigan, win the Big Ten, and win a natty, man, that's just the sweetest thing ever. But I was trying to remember, it took me a second, but that Urban Meyer team that won the natty, they lost to Virginia Tech in like the 2nd game of the year. And so we even had a loss there, and even though Urban Meyer was the Wolverine Slayer, he still had a loss there before they won the natty. So it's possible to have a loss and go win the natty. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So kind of transitioning, but kind of staying on the same generalization. what do you feel like the 2024 class looks like, and how do you think that Ryan Day has impacted recruiting?
So I would say that there's two different things here. So Ryan Day, because of the offense that he brings and the way that they churn out wide receivers because of Brian Hartline, and then the quarterback play, you go all the way back to even Dwayne Haskins and then Justin Fields and now CJ Stroud. That part has been great. And I think he's been learning on the fly with the defensive part. Obviously, there was a misstep with the hiring after Jeff Hafley left. I'm not picking on Kerry Combs, but he was a great DB coach. But when it came to running the entire defense, that we all know what that experiment looked like. I think Jim Knowles made improvements last year, and I think that I said it all along. I thought if Ohio State could have a top 20 defense last year with the offense that they had, they could probably win a national championship. They came close. As far as the recruiting goes, the offensive recruiting, you can't really go wrong with the 5-star receivers and the 5-star quarterbacks. But now with Coach Fry, I've seen a resurgence on the offensive line with the Armstrong twins. I hope they can bring Brandon Baker in. It seems like it's Ohio State and Oregon. I will believe we get a modern day kid when we actually get a modern day kid. It's for whatever reason, those modern day kids, they just don't come to Ohio State. And on the defensive side, though, I'm still concerned. Tim Walton's carrying his weight. Like, man, talk about last year he got Jermaine Matthews and Calvin Simpson-Hunt. This year they bring in Miles Lockhart, Aaron Scott, Bryce West. In the defensive backfield, they've had they brought in Sonny Styles, but I like the kid Peyton Pierce, the linebacker. I love the Garrett Stover picked up, obviously, being related to Cade, so we know that they can play some football. But the defensive line recruiting and the defensive side of the ball, I feel like we're feeling the pain this year, much like we felt the end of the Greg Studwara era, and now. So we're feeling the pain from the Kerry Combs era, and now we're starting that resurgence again, and now things are looking up, and defensively, at least in the secondary. Or the back seven, and then same on the offensive line. Justin Price starting to get that machine rolling again, but we're feeling the pain, and you're seeing it a little bit this year, even with the depth on the offensive line, especially at tackle. The end of the Greg Studwara era affecting them.
Yeah. I mean, overall, it kind of seems like things are still normal, recruiting wise. Everything's still on the up and up.
I would have really loved for them to finished off some of the defensive line recruits, like the Marquise Lightfoot one. I thought for sure, being a Midwest kid, he was going to be a Buckeye. He may still be a Buckeye. They're still working on him. There's problems with the Miami NIL. That could definitely still happen. And Nigel Glover committed to Ohio State right before we came on the air. Obviously the Dylan Stewart thing was kind of honestly a shock, because when he left Columbus and Jeremy Birmingham, I trust him, almost implicitly, and he was saying Dylan Stewart's going to be a Buckeye. But now they have to close. They have to close on Edric Houston. They have to. I don't care if they double his NIL offer, but they have to close on him. He has to be a Buckeye this year, because if Jack Sawyer and JTT and Mike Hall are all projected first rounders next year, and they take off, the depth, even with Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry, there's not much behind those two. Amari Abor, but Josh Mickens was a take for us this year. They were able to flip him late, but need some defensive ends.
Oh yeah, Yeah, for sure. I mean, that kind of seems to be like the weak point to me right now.
Unfortunately, given that Larry Johnson is such a long-standing, well thought of coach who's done a lot and put a lot of guys in the NFL. But the last first rounder was Chase Young.
Yeah.
Are we, it's kind of how I felt when, I'm not going to pick on Michigan too much, but when they had Charles Woodson reach out to Aaron Scott, I mean, I don't even know if Aaron Scott would have watched Charles Woodson play. He played when like in the 90s. So, the video was grainy. So, I'm just saying, like, we're getting a little bit beyond the we've got Nick Bosa, we've had Joe Bosa, we've had Chase Young, but then Zach Harrison went in the third round last year. So I think if JTT and Jack Sawyer play lights out this year and they get drafted in the first round, I think that helps a bunch. Larry put a couple fresh new guys in the NFL and get drafted in the first round. That helps recruiting. But right now, I genuinely am a little concerned. I'm not like hitting the panic button, but I am concerned about the defensive line.
So let's talk a little bit about the quarterback position, because this one's interesting to me. Because, we've seen Kyle McCord play a little bit. Now, of course, everyone's response is, he played against Akron. He played against a nobody. What's he really going to look like? So that's kind of interesting to me. And the other piece I'll mention is that there are some of the Michigan fan base that are worried about a QB switch to one Devin Brown, because their thought is, well, if Ohio State comes up here with Kyle McCord, we're going to beat the ever-loving crap out of them. But if they come up here with Devin Brown, oh my God, hide your children and women, because we're scared because Devin Brown's more of a Braxton Miller, and we didn't know how to beat Braxton Miller.
So I would say two things. The first being that Kyle McCord is more mobile than I think people give him credit for. He was running some zone read in spring ball. He did a couple. I was at the spring game. He moves around pretty well. And one of the guys I was with in the spring game asked me who I thought Kyle McCord reminded me most of, and he jokingly said Patrick Mahomes, and I said no. I would say he moves around and manipulates the pocket. And do you remember? I'm a Browns fan. How incredibly frustrating it was to try to get Ben Roethlisberger down. Like, he just moved just well enough, or would just move just enough to get out of the way, or make it, pick up 4 or 5 yards just enough to break your back. It's kind of who Kyle McCord is not as big as Ben Roethlisberger,
right?
But he manipulates the pocket that way. Now the Devin Brown thing, I get it. He is elusive. I remember. I think I was trying to remember who I asked. It might have been Tom Orr for Buckeye Huddle. Who was faster in a straight line race. And he thought Kyle McCord was faster in a straight line race than Devin Brown, but Devin Brown has that game speed and that twitchiness. And I could see the concern about that. The one difference I would say is that Kyle McCord has a howitzer attached to his right arm, and Devin Brown does not. Devin Brown throws a nice deep ball, but Kyle McCord can sling it, man. I'm going to pose this question to you, and this is something that's bothered me the last 2 years. Okay. If Kyle McCord is good enough to start this year, why was there not a genuine quarterback battle when C.J. Stroud took over in 2021? Why was it C.J.'s job? So, that's my question to you. Why is that the case?
Well, it's well known on video that I'm very critical of CJ. Love CJ because he was the OSU quarterback, but I was very critical because he was not willing to run. I'm not a running back. Well, dude, get with the times. You're supposed to be a dual threat quarterback because that's what works around here. I think a lot of it had to be that Ryan Day, I think, kind of fell into the Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel trap, to where CJ, if I'm not mistaken, CJ was his actual first, like, yeah, he was able to bring Fields in, but it sounded like Fields wanted to come here as long as Urban wasn't going to be here anyway. Didn't matter who it was.
Yeah.
But CJ was Ryan's very first, like, okay, I'm the head coach at Ohio State. I recruited that guy. That's my quarterback. Like Urban did with JT, because there did come a time where it seemed like, okay, maybe we need to move on from JT because JT Barrett is like a freaking grandpa here. He's been here for so long. So I think that's what a lot of it is. I think it's entitlement. I think that Ryan didn't really put the pressure on CJ. He always kind of just was like, that's my guy. He's got the job no matter what. And so why should CJ be worried?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's fair. I can understand that. You know, I they were both 5 stars. They were both highly touted. You know, I do think that this year, if you go with McCord, his familiarity with the offense and then his relationship with Marvin Harrison Jr. helps. And having Marvin Harrison Jr. helps whoever's back there, honestly. But, you know, there's a lot of people that are talking about the quarterback. And obviously, you play quarterback at a Power 5 school like Ohio State, there's a lot of talk about it. I'm concerned about the offensive line and keeping him upright, if I'm being honest. You know, like I will believe that a Ryan Day quarterback fails when a Ryan Day quarterback fails right now because they've had the success that they've had. And while CJ, it drove me crazy that he didn't run, he was very accurate, and he distributed the ball well. And so I think to myself, you know, Dwayne Haskins had that big year. Fields had 2 good years. CJ, you know, second pick in the draft this year. There's nothing in the last few years that tells me that Kyle McCord or Devin Brown can't do that unless the offensive line is trash.
Yeah, I would hope to God the offensive line isn't trash because I mean, it seems to be one of the key strengths Ohio State has in recruiting.
Yeah. Well, so just think of it, though. You're replacing your starting center, your starting left tackle, and your starting right tackle. You're bringing back a 60-year guard in Matthew Jones, and then probably your best offensive lineman, like one of the best in the country, in Donovan Jackson. So I was trying to look back at any genuine national title contenders that replaced their left tackle and their quarterback, or a left tackle and some combination of the two. And I had trouble finding that. And you can find one or the other, but generally not both. And I have a lot of confidence in Fryer. I think, you know, he was the 6th man last year. He saw a lot of action. I'm concerned about switching from the right side to the left side. And one of the things I threw out on Twitter is, and I'm genuinely curious for your take, I would love to see them maybe just move Donovan Jackson out to left tackle, and then move Matthew Jones. And a lot of people maybe don't remember this, but Matthew Jones was like one of the top centers in the country when he committed to Ohio State. And even before he committed, before Harry Miller, you know, even committed, and Luke Whippler. So move him to center, leave Josh Simmons at right tackle, let Fryer play right guard, move him back to the left side, and then try and use Tegra Shabola at left guard, and let your, you know, because if you have a stud like Donovan Jackson, I think he could play tackle. I don't know. It was just something I had in my head, was maybe shift those guys around if you're concerned about Carson Hinsman being a first time, you know, he's a redshirt freshman, I believe. At center, you're bringing in a transfer to play right tackle from San Diego State. There's a lot of unknown on the offensive line. In no way do I think they're going to be trash. Like I was just saying, the only way I don't see a quarterback at Ohio State being successful is if the offensive line is trash. They won't be. Coach Fry will have those guys ready to go, but they have bits and pieces, and I'm wondering how it gels. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I am curious to see how the offensive line does gel as well. I mean, on one hand, I think the best, if you do switch, and I do think that you should, at least at the center position, do the switch. I would make McCord's blind side very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Protect his blind side, and then, because to me, as a quarterback, I would think that you would prefer it to break down in front of you and see it coming off the edge, or up the middle, rather than it coming on the blind side and just taking you completely out.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I kept, circling around the idea of moving Donovan Jackson out there. He's your best offensive lineman. He has quick feet. I think he could play the tackle position. And it's the same with putting Matthew Jones at center. Those are your two best. And Josh Fryer having that playing time last year is significant, because now he could theoretically play at left guard or right guard, and it allows you to put Josh Simmons on the right side, and then, as you said, it would be in front of Kyle, and he would be able to see what was coming. So the backside is protected with Donovan Jackson. It was something I was kicking around and I put out there just as an idea, and I was just curious what other people thought. So
yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I just with the line, like I said, with the line being so inexperienced, you want to put the strength. I can understand how it may be difficult to make the transition, because, if you're so used to going forward or taking a step left, and instead you're going forward or taking a step right, I can get, because your brain has trained your body like, okay, on a run play, I'm going to step left for the block to open the hole. Well, now I got to step right. I can see where that kind of but to a degree, I think it also helps with the first part of this schedule that we'll get into in a little bit. Because outside of Indiana, because Indiana likes to be a little outside of them, up until Notre Dame, it's like there's you've got the right teams on the schedule. And as much as I don't like playing the smaller schools like Western Kentucky, like Youngstown State especially, I see the benefit of playing the schools. Now, I'd prefer to play them like we are this year at the beginning of the season, outside of SEC, playing it late in the season.
Yeah. So I am not a fan of opening up with a Big Ten game on the road. We did it a few years ago against Minnesota, if you remember. In that game, I think they trailed at halftime of that game. And then Travion Henderson hit that screen and broke the thing open and kind of announced himself to the world. Yeah. And but that game, and Indiana, for whatever reason, not I guess in recent memory, but they have a tendency, much like Purdue, to play Ohio State really tough. And first time starting quarterback on the road. Well, I guess he did start against Akron, but on the road in a Big Ten environment, not my favorite thing to do. But yeah, you can get a lot of things right, get the ship righted against a Tom Allen team, and then against Youngstown State. My interesting nugget for the Western Kentucky game is they can sling it. I want to see what our secondary looks like. I mean, Western Kentucky, I wouldn't be surprised if they threw for 300 yards at all. And I do think, Ohio State wins that game, probably going away. But they can sling it a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Just look at Bailey Zapp last year. He broke Joe Burrow's, what was it, touchdown record or something?
Touchdown record, yeah.
Insane.
But you'll know what you have, I feel like, going into the Notre Dame game. And the reason I mentioned that Western Kentucky can sling it is with Sam Hartman transferring to Notre Dame. He's a good quarterback. He's a massive upgrade over Tyler Buckner, and I think that playing Western Kentucky right before Notre Dame actually really genuinely helps the Ohio State secondary get ready for that game. Yeah. Now I don't know who he's going to throw to. I don't think I can name one of their wide receivers, especially now that their tight end left, Moyaki or whatever. But I think that helps them going into that game. And if Ohio State can do what they did last year and run the football, dominate the line of scrimmage, and get Sam Hartman off his mark too defensively, get some pressure, I like our chances in that game because I also don't know. I don't know what to expect of Sam Hartman at Notre Dame. Is the stage too big? Did he do so well because he was playing against sub 500 teams a lot? I don't know. I don't know what to think until I see it, and so I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all kind of questionable.
It is. And that rolls you right into the Maryland game too. And Maryland likes to sling it with Tua, or whatever his name is.
Tualia.
Tualia. So, I think that honestly, I know that we probably as fans think, why are we playing Youngstown in Western Kentucky? But the Western Kentucky game, I genuinely think actually really this year helps Ohio State and the secondary get ready for those next 2 or 3 games because you follow Maryland with Purdue. And they're going to want to sling it. Yeah. So, and then you roll right into Penn State and Drew Aller. So it really, and Wisconsin has a new quarterback this year and they want to spread the ball around. So, thank you, Western Kentucky, for helping us get ready for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. And, we will definitely, so really quick, I'll let you go ahead and it'll show up. Willems said, so what's the biggest weakness for OSU this coming year?
Biggest weakness is the offensive line right now. It's just, they haven't all played together. Last year coming into the season, with Paris Johnson Jr., DeJuan Jones, Luke Whippler, Donovan Jackson, and Matthew Jones, those guys had all together played a ton of football. Now you're starting a redshirt freshman center, a transfer right tackle, and your sixth man from the offensive line last year at left tackle. I know that they are Division I athletes and that they'll rise to the occasion. I genuinely, back in January and February, was really hoping they would go out and bring in a transfer starting left tackle to take that pressure off of Josh Fryer so that he could play right tackle. So that's going to be my answer, and I'm going to kind of stay with it. I think they addressed the needs in the secondary. Davis Nigbenosin coming in, and then Jordan Hancock being healthy, Jair Brown having another year under his belt, Denzel Burke is healthy again, and I know I'm going to say this about last year. I don't know if people know, but in the summer last year, Ohio State had 6 scholarship cornerbacks, and when they got dinged up, they had their backup kicker, Austin Siebert, repping at corner because they didn't have anybody else. That's how bad and banged up the corners were last year and how thin they were. So they've addressed that, and that makes a big deal. And then you have true freshmen, or you have Ryan Turner, and then you have true freshmen Calvin Simpson-Hunt and Jermaine Matthews as well. So there's a lot of depth and talent this year, and that makes a ton of difference to me. So, last year I would have said the secondary. This year I'll say the offensive line.
Yeah. I still, for me, it's kind of a tie between the two. I still have questions. I admittedly been busy outside of doing all of this that I still haven't had a chance to watch the spring game, but it's probably something I should do to get a better look at the secondary. But for me, it's a question for both. I need to see, a full go. What does the product look like at 100%? Because I don't want to come into these big, important games like Western Kentucky. Like you said, they can sling it. Wisconsin, Penn State. What's Drew Aller going to look like? Mm-hmm. Michigan. Oh, my gosh. J.J. McCarthy hit a dude wide open for 75-yard bomb and a touchdown. Hey, congratulations.
Yeah.
Can you throw it beamer when the window is like that big?
Right.
The dude on the move.
Yep. Well, the one thing I would say, and maybe this matters, maybe it doesn't, but when I got a chance to watch one of the spring practices, and I saw, and I didn't know it was Davison Igbinosun. He was wearing number 20, and that's what Sonny Styles wore last year. And I was like, wow, that doesn't look like Sonny Styles. And it was Davison Igbinosun. That's how big that kid is. He's the same size as Sonny Styles, only playing corner. Or he looks the same. The physical features. He's tall. He's lanky. I think he makes a big difference in the secondary this year, because now, you really can rep Jordan Hancock at that nickel position if you'd like to, and the nickel corner, and put Igbinosun on the outside with Denzel Burke, and then your fourth corner kind of becomes Jair Brown, and it's not like last year where you had safeties trying to cover corners or trying to cover wide receivers, and you put Latham Ransom in the national championship game in a 1-on-1 zero coverage, and he slips and falls, or not national championship, in the Peach Bowl. Well, it was a national championship. We all know that was the actual national championship game, Ohio State and Georgia.
For the Peach Bowl, yeah.
Yeah. So, no slight to Tanner McAllister last year. Like, I'm sure he helped instill Jim Knowles' defense, but Tanner McAllister is not Sonny Styles. He is not Latham Ransom. And I think that nickel corner spot, having Igbinosun this year, makes a huge difference. And he played a year in the SEC, so he can play big boy football.
Yeah, so it'll definitely be interesting as far as like the individual positions to see how the growth goes this season. So before we get into the schedule breakdown, let's have a quick word from our sponsor.
In a world full of fakes, how to avoid buying fake items that look just like the real thing? Are you getting faked over? Experts say it's all in the details.
Right on.
All right, we are back. And before we hop into the schedule, I just want to give a big thank you and a shout out to eBay for sponsoring us. They are the first sponsor that we've had, and we look to help build the partnership with eBay as we go forward. If you do shop eBay, please, as the ad said, use the link in the description. You get up to 60% off on certain items over on eBay. So give it a check out, and hope y'all enjoy. All right, so schedule talk, my favorite part of all of this. As we kind of alluded to, Indiana is going to be tough. I think it could be a close one. It is in Indiana. They do tend to play both us and Michigan, very close and tough. But
that's
yeah,
their Super Bowl. That's their Super Bowl. Ohio State and Michigan. That's their Super Bowl.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We're going to get everybody's best shot. That's part of being a top 5 team in the country.
Oh yeah. So I think that's a win. Youngstown State, they're coming in, and it's basically like, here's the paycheck. I think that's a win. Western Kentucky, like you said, high flying, slinging ball style of offense. What's the defense look like? Because that's what it's going to come down to. Because if Western Kentucky comes out and kind of looks like Akron from a couple of years ago, I think it could matter for about a quarter and a half. But I do eventually see Ohio State maybe not running away with it in the sense of almost scoring 100 points on Western Kentucky. But enough of a margin for sure. Notre Dame will be the question, as we alluded to. There's a lot of questions on both sides. Being an Ohio State fan, you would think that I would say it's a win. But here is what I think record-wise. Now, the ceiling is a 12-0. I think there is the potential to beat everyone on this schedule.
Mm-hmm.
My floor is my actual projection that I've gone with for a while. Now, the question is, well, where do you think the loss comes? And with the trend of losing to Michigan every year, most people would say Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
No. It's right here. It's Notre Dame. I think, having won the last 5 against Notre Dame and owning that series 5-2, the fact that realistically they played us the best out of everybody besides Michigan that we played last year. Not a lot of people probably remember. I think that game was only an 11-point game. It was only 21-10, I believe.
Right.
So, because I do think there's enough on the Notre Dame defense that I think they have enough to at least hold the offense. And it is early enough in the season as well, that as long as you go on a run and you beat the teams you're supposed to beat in the sense of how you're supposed to beat them, I think, there's enough ground there to recover and still make the playoff if you lose that game.
Yeah, so the over-under for Vegas is 10.5. So I'm taking the over, for Ohio State. And I agree with I think they could run the table. I 100% think they could run the table. And the game I circled, you dropped some show notes to me beforehand, and I really sat down and looked at it. And it's the Wisconsin game for me. They play Purdue, then Penn State, then Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's a night game in Madison against Luke Fickell. And so you got to get up for Penn State, and be ready. And then that's a night game at the end of October 28th, Halloween weekend in Madison, Wisconsin, against a coach that really wants to beat you, that played for you and coached for you. So if I was going to pick a game, I like your Notre Dame pick. I think Notre Dame could have their number this year. That's a close one. It's a flip of a coin for me. But if I was just looking at this and I thought, what game could I see us dropping because of the way that the schedule shakes out? It's Wisconsin. Now, I don't know what they're going to look like with a change of offense, but if I was going to circle one, then I thought, I don't like that at all. That's the one.
Yeah, and I could see that too. I have honestly gone back and forth because my generalization losses are Notre Dame, and if it's not Notre Dame, it could be Wisconsin. If it's not Wisconsin, I'm a little worried that it could be Michigan because everybody knows Michigan has our number. So it's going to be, in my opinion, one of those three. And the reason I would almost agree with Wisconsin is it could be 2017 all over again, except Iowa is now Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Because 2017 we had that miraculous.
Let me ask you this, and this is just some.
Uh-oh.
Twitter is. Uh-oh. Oh, did I lose you?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, and I have friends that are Michigan fans. Besides Will Johnson, who's going to cover? So if Will Johnson is 1-to-1 with Marvin Harrison Jr. this year, what corner is going to cover Emeka Egbuka or Julian Fleming or Xavier Johnson or Carnell Tate? Take your pick of any of those. And then, so yeah, you have Will Johnson. I'll give you that. That dude's a stud. He's going to be a first-round pick, and I love his game. Mad props to him. But I realize I talked about the offensive line, but who are you going to cover Emeka Egbuka or Julian Fleming with for the game, the whole game, and hold them down? And so while, yes, I agree Michigan is tough and they've had our number, I feel like I'm just really wondering about that this year, because last year we started a fifth string running back who was a linebacker for the game. So if the running back room is healthy, I'm just spitballing. I'm just wondering, and I'm not dissing Michigan because they have beat us. They beat us soundly. Last year, I think was more about they just flat out executed better than Ohio State did in the second half of the game. And I'm not afraid to admit that, but I'm curious, if all things are equal and everybody's healthy and everything's going, and the Buckeyes come in rolling into Ann Arbor healthy, who is your, who steps up for Michigan this year is where I'm curious, besides Will Johnson.
I don't know. I mean, the thing, when I look back at the difference between 22 and 21 is in 22, they didn't have BC, but it turns out it didn't really matter.
No.
So in a sense, it's almost like the same kind of question for us. Like who is going to cover Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards? Who's going to, come off the edge fast enough to just plow over the lineman and get to JJ?
Yeah.
Or at least make JJ run into a sandwich trap.
Yep, that's true.
I mean, there's just so many questions with that game alone.
Yep.
I don't usually sweat bullets with it, and maybe it's because I never went this far with it where I'm like really covering it, but I've never felt so much with my back against the wall for that game.
Yeah, that's true. I haven't felt this way since the 90s. So,
uh-oh.
I think my phone is telling me it's time to be done because I've got 10% left on my phone, so it's battery life. But yeah, I haven't felt this way about Michigan since the 90s, where we lost so many in a row. And now I could only imagine how Michigan felt when we had back-to-back winning streaks of 7 games. That had to be miserable.
Absolutely miserable. Well, I mean, yeah, for the most part, we've kind of touched on everything. So I'm cool if you want to wrap it here. Uh-oh.
All right. I guess that's gonna do it for me. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. This has been great. My phone's at 5% now, so
you're good.
Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate it. I thank you for the shout out too for the Buckeye Blitz. I've been doing it for a little while and it's been great. And this has been great to be part of this podcast. Thanks to Shady Sports Network, eBay. I use eBay because I have a 64 Impala and I need parts for it. So, but I appreciate it, Buckeye Mike. And this has been great. So thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Hope to have you on again.
Yeah. Take care, sir.
You too.
Go Bucks.
Go Bucks. All right. And before we close out the show tonight, remember to go over to our next stream in a few minutes. So I'm kind of rushing along here, where we're going to sit down with Mr. Truitt of the Sideline Sports Network. He is a representative of Virginia Tech. So I hope to see y'all over there. Again, everyone, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. Willems, I see your comment. Ask me in DMs. No problem. I'll give you my thoughts. Thank you again. Shout out to Shady Sports Network. Go and subscribe over there as well. They're striving for 1,000 subs. You know what? Let's help them get hopefully to 1,000 before or by college football kickoff, because I will bring you as much college football coverage as possible. I'm your guy, 100%. There may be others for the network, but you know what? My DMs are always open. There's where you can find me on Twitter. Shoot me any questions. I'll answer them all. I appreciate everyone for coming here tonight. See you in the next one. And you know what? Subscribe to my channel as well before I forget. Subscribe right here to Buckeye Mike, because we're striving for 150 subs before the season kicks off. So the closer we can get, Shady to 1,000, that's awesome. They're a great partner. I love the work they do. I'm so thankful they brought me on. And we're striving for 150. That's the big numbers, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone have a good night. I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much.